Hey guys, this is another episode of Conservative Shoutout. Today I'm so happy to have my sister Kelly Woodford on with me. She is a student at Covenant College up in Lookout Mountain, Georgia, and is in her last semester of her senior year. She's majoring in English, and one of the things that she hopes to do after college is to be a teacher. So as you and I both know, Kelly, some of the things that have been happening in the news lately include how President Trump has been impeached for a second time. We've seen that there was a compromised election that just took place. And also, more and more, we're seeing conservatives being censored on social media and a crackdown like maybe we've never seen before in our country. So, in your opinion, from the standpoint of education, how do you think education has played a role in where we are today?
Well, I think education has played a major role in how society has developed, because this public school system in America is essentially just an indoctrination center for the left. They're places where the left has been able to enforce their ideology. So they have these ideas of white fragility or LGBTQ agenda or revisionist history, and all these things have been slowly seeped into our schools, and then they've been slowly learned by the children in the schools, because children are most susceptible to this sort of thing. And I think all this is really ironic because up until about the 1940s, the schools were entirely Christian. So they were founded on Christian principles. They taught that Jesus Christ was Lord and that he was king. They would teach the Bible. They would teach scripture verses.
Right, and like wasn't that with the New England Primer where they taught in Adam's fall we sinned all?
Exactly. So during the Puritan times, they were teaching things like that. They were teaching the Bible, they were teaching about Adam and morality. And then in the 1940s, we had cases start to arise, such as Everson versus the Board of Education, or Engel v. Vitale, and all these cases showed up, and they started to say that, hey, the First Amendment of the Constitution says that we cannot be promoting one single state religion. So our society started to shift, and they started to recognize that by teaching Christianity in schools, that was sort of a violation of the First Amendment. So we started taking all these things out of the schools, and in its place, we substituted atheism, and we said, all right, we can't have religion anymore, so let's put atheism in its place. And the ironic thing about this is that atheism is actually its own religion, if you think about it, and if you look at it, and you look at the way it's started to become defined, atheism is its own religion that's just taken the place of the schools. So, for example, if you look, in 1964, there's a case called the United States versus Seeger, which was the case of conscientious objection. And that's when things started to shift, and we recognized that religion is no longer defined as a belief in God or a belief in a supreme being, but it started to be defined as something that someone held to firmly as and had the same level of religion in their life.
And would you mind just giving a brief maybe history as to why that person wanted to object?
Right. So in United States versus Seeger, so some people came forward and said that they weren't Christians, they weren't Buddhists, or they didn't have any sort of traditional religion that believed in a God or something like that, but they were atheists who firmly objected to fighting in war. So they didn't want to go to war, and they held that firmly, that they're firmly pacifists. And the Supreme Court ruled in their favor and said that that was their religion, and that belief was on the same level of a religion.
Okay.
So with that case, the definition started to shift and started to change. And using that as a precedent, we see some other cases start to arise. So more recently, in 2005, we have this case called Kaufman versus McCautry. And in Kaufman versus McCautry, there's a man named James Kaufman who's an atheist so he's in jail and he's a prison inmate, and his religious rights were not being upheld. And so he went to court, and the court ruled in his favor. And they ruled in his favor in saying that religion or atheism was his religion. So we have legal precedent nowadays that says that atheism is a religion. Okay. And all this tangent aside, what I'm trying to communicate by saying this is that the schools in America today are doing the exact same thing they were doing in the 1940s and before. They have replaced Christianity with atheism and said, this is not a religion, we can get away with this. And they can get away with putting all of their liberal agenda and all of their beliefs into the schools because it's not a religion. When in fact it really is. It's the exact same thing. It's just a little sneakier version of religion.
It's a really interesting point. It's a sneakier version of religion. And sort of just playing off of that a bit, I guess. So with all this Christianity being taken out of the schools, how do you think the act of taking Christianity out of the schools led to where we are today, with historical revisionism, and even the censorship, especially? Our mom was just taken off of Facebook this past Sunday. For those of you who didn't know, she completely was removed. She supposedly violated their community standards. So she absolutely does not condone any violence. So there's no reason that could have been a part of it, but she was an outspoken conservative. It's ridiculous what's happening. So any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah. Essentially, the left has managed to wiggle their way into power in our life, in our ideology, in the way our society runs. And anything that disagrees with their agenda, they target. And it started with taking Christianity out of the schools, or at least that was one of the first things. Is they started censoring Christianity. They started censoring our religious beliefs, and they had reason to do that at the time with the First Amendment, and that made sense. But they've taken it further, and they've taken it further, and they keep taking it further and further and further, to the point that our mom can't even be on Facebook. And so I don't know. Anytime anyone seems to disagree with them, we get censored.
For sure. It just seems so alarming that it started so slowly, and maybe we didn't realize even what was happening. But now here in 2021, we wake up and we see freedom completely, with Donald Trump being removed from Twitter, with Parler being taken off of Apple's platforms and also Amazon servers. This is almost unparalleled to anything we've seen in recent decades. And it's almost like it happened almost overnight, right? So I guess maybe, is there anything we as Christians can do to help better education in the future? Any strategies or tools that we can follow?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, fight to recognize that atheism is a religion, and all their things that they're promoting are religions, or they're not neutral ground at the very least, that they are contested. And to teach them to children in schools like they're facts.
We're so impressionable.
Exactly, impressionable children, and teach them as facts is not a fair assessment. We need to fight for our private schools. We need to fight for our Christian schools, our home schools, and all of these things that are a protection against the public schools. So all of these alternative options are so important to maintaining our religious freedom and our freedom of free speech.
With school choice too, right?
Exactly. With school choice. And so we need to fight, because these young children are so impressionable at this age that this is such an important issue to be fighting. Because school children, this is the time that they'll be influenced, and this is such an important time that we need to make sure we're fighting for it. So again, we need to keep fighting for our private schools, for our Christian schools, and our home schools, because again, whoever controls the schools controls the world.
I totally agree with that. I know you and I were both homeschooled through high school. I just want to thank you, Kelly, so much for sharing those thoughts with us. Those things really need to be shared. And we want to thank you guys for listening to another episode of Conservative Shoutout. Please make sure to subscribe and also sign up for notifications. We hope to see you next time. Thanks so much, and God bless.